Hey everyone, welcome to Birth Podcast. I'm Ash. Recently I was in Florence, Italy, and I sat down with Professor Angelica Pesarini, who is a PhD and a woman of color who is the only female sociology professor in the country, and she works for New York University. We sat down for dinner and had a conversation about some of the socio-political struggles within the country as it concerns women, as it concerns Black lives. Take a listen.
From anthropology to sociology, I noticed that sociology probably helps you to understand the structures of power that then shape certain cultures. While with anthropology, I feel with anthropology there is a lot of fetishism for the other, while when you do sociology, you kind of deconstruct the other.
Right. And it maybe invites more participation. Because ultimately you must respond to that other once you've deconstructed.
Exactly. Maybe I can talk about my experience.
Of course.
When I was a kid in the 80s, a teen in the 90s, and I was in Reggio Emilia, so the plains, everything is very flat, greens, incredibly white. And so for me that was kind of an issue, because I remember from kindergarten until almost university, I never had a non-white peer in class, ever. It was just me. And so every time I was leaving my home, I couldn't see myself represented anywhere. And wherever I was going, I was always the only brown spot, And so, of course, I was asked many questions since a very young age about my identity, who am I, where I'm from, where I'm really from, why do I speak such a good Italian, where did you learn? And so these were questions that obviously were disturbing, because I felt Italian, I had no doubts, but I was not colorblind, so I could see my skin color very well. But I think I didn't have the tools to make sense of it, because nobody else was like me. And so I had this fascination with American programs, because there I could see it, the Cosby Show. And now if you think about it, oh my gosh, destroyed my my childhood. But yeah, that was a very normal family like mine, and it gave me a sense of reassurance. But then every time I was leaving my home, and so it was difficult. It was difficult because it's a journey that you have to do. And then growing up, obviously, there are already being a teen is difficult. But then if you are a person of color in a completely white environment, it was not easy. But then going to London when I was 18, I think, 19, really changed my views and my world, because I saw a society that was, so many colors and cultures and religion, something I couldn't even imagine. And so that experience was really formative, because it opened many doors for me. In fact, then I went back to London. I stayed in the UK for 10 years. And so it really helped to shape who I am now.
Your family, did they come into Italy as refugees, as immigrants?
No, that's interesting, because my parents are Italian.
Okay.
And my grandparents are Italian.
Okay.
So, but we are all brown Italians.
Right.
And this is the interesting part, is colonialism.
Okay, sure, of course.
Colonialism.
I only ask because Europe seems to have a much different space around it sometimes than I think the US does. Where people are more in touch sometimes with that origin than maybe the Americans are. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm curious. By no means do I mean to offend.
No, it's interesting because the colonial link is the missing link. And so, because it's the missing link, many stories have not been told or heard. And so this was also, for me, a personal problem because, I mean, my great-grandfather went to Somalia at the beginning of the 1900s. And so my grandparents were already brown Italians in the former colonies in the 1930s, when Italy was a fascist country. So there was this disconnection between fascist Italy and fascist East Africa, where there were many, many brown Italians who, by right of blood, this famous law we have, the jus sanguinis, they had the right blood because if their father was recognizing them as their children, they were Italian, but they had brown skin. And so already from the 1900s, the Italian government, the colonial government, had to think what to do with these Italians, how they are Italian, why are they Italian. And this is how they started to attach biology to identity, which I think is something really important in today's Italy, because having a law that still in 2020 connects your identity to your blood that has been transmitted to you is very problematic, right? Because the idea was you were born, because when Italy unified as a country in 1861, 2% of the population spoke Italian.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was a complete, like so many micro-states and kingdoms. So the unification process was very difficult. And also, economically was very draining the country. So imagine that between 1890 and 1916, 14 million Italians left out of 38 million. So half of the country. And so this was free workload for the country receiving, who were actually imposing their citizenship on them. And so for Italy, I guess, the only way to claim a tie, a link with all this Italian diaspora was blood. So wherever you were born, you will be Italian. So it makes sense. But at the moment in Italy, we have between 600,000 and 900,000 people born in Italy from non-Italian parents. So they don't have this blood that has been transmitted to them, but they were born and raised in this country, and they're not Italian.
That's really interesting to me.
They're foreigners legally. So until the age of 18, this country doesn't recognize you as an Italian. How crazy is
and
that?
then you have to, you have to apply
And then
for
you
it. It
have to
sounds
apply.
like, yeah. Which, if you're having a bad day and you miss something, they could deny you, and then you have to come back and do it all over again.
It's very discretionary, so very often there are mistakes made by the employees. Because it's very bureaucratic. You have to demonstrate so many things. And if someone makes a mistake in your application, it's rejected. And also the waiting time, before was 2 years, and now the former government, Salvini Di Maio, doubled the time.
So you apply at 18, but you might not become a citizen until you're 21.
Yes, 22.
22. Jesus.
And this never happens. Like, you will never have a response within 4 years now. Before it was 2 years and it was impossible, so I'm pretty sure now. And they also increased the price. It's very expensive. So imagine many people prefer to wait until they are 28, so they can be naturalized.
So you can become naturalized when you're 28.
After 10 years of permanent residence in Italy, which is already a lot. Usually it's 5 years.
Jesus.
Can you imagine? Yeah, people when they're 18, they wait until they are 28, because anyway, you apply and you may receive the notification.
But it means that you're under your parents' just guardianship. It's not even citizenship necessarily, it's just guardianship and paperwork.
And then you take, I guess, your parents' nationality. But how can you be a national of a country where maybe you've never been, or you go just once a year?
Well, you can't go anywhere for 10 years though, really, to do much
Yeah.
without proper passport and paperwork.
Yeah. In fact, for example, the first trips abroad that you do with school when you're 14, 15, very exciting times, these kids cannot do it because they don't have the right to leave Italy. So they have to ask for a visa. You go to Paris for 3 days with the school. With my ID, I don't even need a passport, I just need an ID. I come and go as I want. If you don't have it, if you're not Italian, you need to apply for a visa, which is super expensive, takes a long time, and so many kids don't go.
It's heartbreaking.
And the resistance to change this law, it's unbelievable. Maybe once I told you about it, they did a lot of campaigns, and both right-wing and left-wing. Right-wing we know they don't want, right, because they see it as a contamination of the race. And the left-wing is more subtle, is more ambiguous, because they kind of say they're interested in doing it, but then they know they lose consensus. And so when it's the time to act, they disappear, as they did last time.
And I continually go back to this idea that, in my mind, racism is about the lowest, maybe the most lazy form of tribal groupthink, right? Because it's saying there's nothing else about you I can criticize or differentiate myself, therefore I'm going to discriminate against you because of simply the color of your skin, the thing you cannot control, no matter what your story is or your background is.
Yeah.
And this then creates, and people hold so hard to this because it's a body shame, right? Like it's shaming your very structure, your very being.
Yeah. But this is how it started, when Europeans needed to exploit people and resources. They were people like you, so how can you justify the fact you're enslaving someone if it's like you? You need to find some weaknesses, some inferiorities, some faults. So races and classification of people according to race, inferior, superior, intelligent, not intelligent. I think that in the US it's impossible to, like, this individualism is, the protest
individualism is destroying us.
It was a bit shocking to see people in Michigan protesting with rifle because they couldn't do their hair or they couldn't do their nails and not wearing this mask.
But these are people who don't want to look at their own selves. You know what I mean? Like, again, we were talking about self-reflection. Like, spirituality is soulful reflection, right? Regardless of whatever your belief is. COVID-19 didn't just reveal economic issues or race issues or other things, gender, domestic violence. It also reveals how many people have no idea who they even are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if we go deeper, that guy with the gun, he has no idea how to sit. Now, I'm not saying that he shouldn't be held accountable and he shouldn't be, arrested for what he's done, but his own self-reflection, he can't handle his own self-reflection in the mirror.
Definitely.
You know what I mean? We have to be able to hold two truths at the same time. What this person is doing is wrong and is not okay, but at the same time we also understand where the problem comes from.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it goes a bit, gender norms and affections, emotions, masculinity.
Oh, toxic masculinity. Very much so.
Absolutely.
Very much so.
Race and racism developed in a completely different way. In Europe, you cannot use the word race. It's illegal.
To use the word race?
Yeah. France removed the word race from the constitution.
Okay.
So the European approach is the opposite of the US. In the US, people identify with a race, right?
Right.
Which for us is, oh my God. But here is the opposite. Here it's colorblind. Color doesn't exist.
Which is its own problem, right?
Which is incredibly problematic.
Right.
Because we cannot even mention it. We cannot monitor it.
Yeah.
And this is one of the issues. We cannot monitor racism because we cannot collect ethnic data. And so we don't know how many black people we have. How many are they Italian, Who does suffer racist bullying in school? We don't know.
Right. It hides the discrimination
Completely.
and disparity.
Put everything under the rug.
But you bring up a good point, because there is a debate in America about being colorblind, right? Because white people say, well, I don't see color. Yes, you do. But the problem is...
That's white privilege to say I don't see color.
But I think there's the debate of like the idea of being even Jane Elliott. She's very famous in the States. In the 1970s, she did what was called the blue-eyed, black-eyed experiment.
All right.
Okay.
Yes.
So people love her.
Yeah.
But she's interesting because she talks about, well, we're all one human race, rather than black race, because she talks about, and I understand what she's doing.
Yeah.
I 100%, and I get it, and I think there's some good in it. The problem is, because of how we've developed and the wounding of racial disparity, we have to acknowledge that there's, and in order for you to find where the disparity, like you were saying, like you can't find where the disparity is.
Exactly. We're not equal. We don't start from the same starting point in life. So if you say there are just people, I don't see colors, you assume everyone is the same. But by doing that, you completely erase all the inequalities that characterize people's lives.
It's interesting because what happened, Jane talks about, she goes, look, I am and she has said this among black people, that's why black people love her, because she'll say, I'm technically an African who migrated and lost all my melanin. Theoretically, she's correct, right? But we have to look at how the whiteness was then used. The interesting thing is that in France, Assad does not like the phrase white privilege, because in her mind, if I say to you, well, I'm going to use my privilege to help you, well, I've just kept you down and said you still need me.
Yeah.
Your power has to be equal to me. So the only way for us to fight this is to recognize our equal power, right? So yes, maybe I benefited from something within the system, but if I recognize that, then it's my responsibility to just then step into the equality that we want to build. And I think that's kind of her perspective on it.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because there is always this risk of white saviorism, which is really prominent. Oh my God, in Italy it's so prominent. I help you, I save you, But I think for me it's more being aware of your positionality.
It's a good way to put it.
You know where you are located in this fight, you know what your position is, what your power is, and you can use it strategically.
Yeah.
If there is,
that.
I think personally there are no alliances until we all are aware of our positions. If you don't know where your position is, how can you understand?
That's a very interesting way to put it. There are no alliances until we're aware.
Of course.
That's fair.
And this I learned this in Israel-Palestine actually, because this Palestinian woman, these Palestinian activists, elderly ladies, someone asked them so what do you think of these Israeli women who are activists in the cause? And she was saying that, that's fine, but they need to be aware of what position is. And then we can fight together.
Right.
If you think that we're all equal, we're all women and we fight against one cause, well, it's already wrong because we are two women, but we have very different positionalities, right? So we have to be aware of our differences in order to fight for the same cause.
Well, and I would agree with that to an extent. I say that, we have to be aware of our differences, but then use our differences to create the unity we want to build. So I keep going back to the conversation with folks about abolition feminism, which is Angela Davis's idea about the system wasn't created to include me, so I don't want to be included in your system. She is a black woman. I want to abolish this and create a system for which we create one that is inclusive from the beginning in the first place.
Yeah.
So in my mind, the differences then should help us create something new rather than use something old.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. But we need to be aware.
Well, sure. No.
Differences.
Awareness is key. Awareness is always key.
So
most people are not aware.
Well, it's not. we shouldn't take it for granted, because many people, like, there is this fragility in admitting differences, like and guilt. I mean, this is what I say. You should. People cannot and should not feel guilty because they're white, because you cannot decide the tone of your skin. I notice a bit of fragmentation at the moment. Not much unity, but it's something new. Everyone has to digest everything that is happening, and conversations on race in this country are very new.
Yeah.
And very uncomfortable. And because it's such a male-dominated society, even when we talk about race or gender, we always have white men on TV. TV is the main medium for information in Italy, as you probably know. It was shocking, a few weeks ago there was they were talking about the Me Too movement, and they invited two men to talk about it. And then they were talking about colonialism and black women, and they invited black men to talk about it. White men to talk about it, sorry. So you wonder, oh my god, there is something like, what's happening here?
I hope that this gave you some idea. I hope that Angelica's words maybe inspired you to look within your own communities, to consider how we can continue to close the gap between men and women and fight against patriarchal systems. Because she's part of that fight too, even by the very act of teaching. If you want to follow Angelica's work, I'll put a link in the description box where you can find her page. For now, I will leave you there. May you live and move and have your being. Cheers.